Today I present to you the late photographer Don Hogan Charles. Don Hogan Charles is widely known for blazing the trail for others as the first black photographer to ever be hired by the New York Times. After joining that renowned publication in 1964, he'd go on to spend more than 40 years at the Times. His signature work involved documenting key moments and people of the civil rights era and capturing New York life from the black perspective. Here's one of those key people from the civil rights era. This is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who at this time was known as Luau Sendor, sitting courtside with his high school basketball team. This image effectively captures the experience of the black American athlete breaking into exclusively white spaces. Here, Don Hogan Charles frames Abdul-Jabbar in the middle of a predominantly white team amidst a predominantly white crowd, positioned with the trophy he earned for breaking a high school record. He would go on to break many records at the high school, college, and professional levels. As a sophomore at UCLA, in his first year on the varsity squad, he led the team to an undefeated season and the national championship title. Abdul-Jabbar was so dominant that the NCAA College Basketball Competition Committee banned the slam dunk to try and slow him down and provide advantage to majority white teams, which were majority of the college programs, because white players in that era rarely dunked the basketball. Not to be stopped, Abdul-Jabbar would only lose 2 games over the course of his junior and senior years, winning national titles in both of those. 19 years after this picture was made, Abdul-Jabbar surpassed Wilt Chamberlain to become the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, a record that incredibly still stands to this day, 37 years later. Beyond his basketball prowess, though, is where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's greatness truly lies. Abdul-Jabbar found his calling to serve his community following the 1964 police murder of an unarmed black teenager named James Powell. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is an athlete turned activist who, along with his contemporaries such as Bill Russell, Jim Brown, and Muhammad Ali, used his platform as a pro-athlete to combat white supremacy. Despite death threats, negative press from white media outlets, and endless slander, Abdul-Jabbar boycotted the 1968 Olympic Games to protest systemic racism and police brutality exacted on the black community. This is the rich history contained within this photo made by Don Hogan Charles. Here is a picture of some brothers and sisters building community with each other on a typical afternoon in Harlem in 1966. It's so beautiful that in this photo, interwoven into his use of the rule of thirds and leading lines is the resiliency of black people in America. Here, Don Hogan Charles captures a mother and child casually walking in their Harlem neighborhood. This image evokes safety and serenity. But this next image captures the reality of how unsafe black people actually were and continue to be. When I first viewed this image, my attention was immediately drawn to the armed forces, brazenly using intimidation tactics in the black community. Only then did my gaze shift to the youngster walking helplessly in front of the troops with his hands up. Don't shoot. The armed forces were sent into New Jersey to squash the people's uprising, following the police brutalizing a black taxi driver named John William Smith. Here in the year 1968, Don Hogan Charles made a photo of Coretta Scott King, an entertainer and activist Harry Belafonte, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. In it, he captures the confusion, the despair, the grief, and the resilience of black people in the face of the never-ending waves of white supremacy. Here's another photo of the funeral in which you can see the outpouring of support from the community for the late Dr. King, who by the time he was assassinated was highly feared by the U.S. government after setting his focus on racism's twin sibling, capitalism. In Dr. King's final speech, given on April 3, 1968, the day before he was murdered, he centered his messaging around economic empowerment for the black community and the eradication of poverty. It amazes me that all of this context is contained within this very frame. Also of note is Don Hogan Charles' excellent use of point of view, changing his vantage point to really obtain a powerful glimpse of what was really going on. Also captured, if you look closely, are other photographers who sought similar high ground on the opposite side of the street. Here's a classic photo of 2 of the all-time great boxers in the history of the sport, including the GOAT himself, Muhammad Ali. Unbelievably, Ali was an even more powerful activist than he was a boxer. In April of 1967, Ali took as great a stance against the colonial imperialism practices of the United States as any other person before or after him. He refused being drafted into the Vietnam War because black people had no beef with the brown people of Vietnam. Ali was stripped of his heavyweight title and sentenced to 5 years in prison for draft evasion. This photo was taken 2 years after his release. He won this fight just as he had previously won the hearts and minds of his community. This is just a beautiful photo that Don Hogan Charles made of a rehearsal taking place at the Dance Theater in Harlem. The elegant dancer being lifted in position reiterates to me that it's up to Black people to elevate our Black creatives. For instance, for this assignment, we were given a list of photographers from which we could choose to present on, but the first 35 photographers named on that list were white. I had to look outside of the provided list to find adequate representation. This photo serves as a reflection of sorts of my efforts, which are part of the larger movement of highlighting Black people's artistry. And for the late Don Hogan Charles' most famous photo, here's Brother Malcolm X, armed and standing lookout in the window. This picture was about him protecting himself and his family from people who were endangering them and sending them death threats. It came to symbolize a call to action for Black people to protect ourselves and our community from systemic racism and white supremacy by any means necessary. This classic photo first appeared in the September 1964 issue of Ebony magazine. And by this time, Brother Malcolm had changed his name to El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz after having made a pilgrimage to Mecca just 5 months earlier. 3 months before this photo was published, Brother El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz went on record naming racism as the enemy of justice. On February 21st, 1965, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz was assassinated. His thoughts and teachings live on, though. Gratitude to Don Hogan Charles for capturing both the intent and the extent to which we must diligently practice anti-racism.